Hey there, Pro Church Media community, this is Jason again, and in this super fun tutorial, we're going to look at how to create some retro-styled text inside of Photoshop with just a little bit of help from Illustrator along the way. We're going to be doing this as non-destructively as possible, and yes, in case you were wondering, there will be overwrought bevels. Yes, there will be a ridiculous amount of gradients, and of course, there will be a gratuitous amount of glow, because how else could you do retro-styled text without all of these things? I've never heard of it. Anyway, this is going to be super fun. You're going to learn a ton, so let's dive right into it. Okay, so we're here in Photoshop, and let's just create a new document. Command N on your keyboard. I'm just going to do 2000 by 2000, I believe. And there we go. Hit create, and you have our new document. Now I'm just going to use the rectangle tool to just create a background. And I'm just going to make this kind of a darkish blue. Maybe more like a navy, something deep navy, something like that. Hit OK, and then I'm just going to add a quick gradient overlay to it. Yeah, I like this right here. It's kind of that navy color to a darker blue, just to give it a little bit of a gradient difference. And then maybe put the mode to soft light, opacity about 50% or so. You can play around with the angle and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty subtle, but that's exactly what I want. So got our background. Okay. Now let's add some text in here, and I'm going to be using a font called Handle Gothic. And so if you go to fonts.adobe.com, you can sync that right up. Just go up to the search and type in Handle. It'll take you to the Handle Gothic. You can just go to there, and then I'm going to be using this Handle Gothic Bold. You can just click that if you don't already have it activated. It'll sync right to your computer, and you'll be good to go. Alright, so back in Photoshop, I'm just going to get my text tool with the T key on the keyboard, and then just type in my text. You can do whatever you want. I'm just going to do God, and then do Command T to pull up the free transform, hold alternate, and that'll scale it right in the center, and just nice and big and bold, something like that. I think that'll work pretty well. Let's just stick it right there. Doesn't really matter what color it is because we're going to be changing up the colors. Okay, so in our previous example, you can see we have this really nice kind of multicolored gradient going on here. And so let's just double click right here and go to gradient overlay. And now we need to just create a gradient overlay here. So let's just click on this gradient thing right here. And we want to add, let's just start with like a nice kind of punchy yellow up here, maybe almost orange, yellowish orange right there. Nice and bold. And then we want to come down here. Maybe we could have it go a little bit lighter. And then we want to maybe do something like a deep, maybe almost like the background color. Maybe a little bit lighter, just kind of a deep navy like that. And we want to have this, be really crisp right there. So just drag that until it gets nice and crisp there. And then we can come over here and we'll just add another step there. Click here and let's start with our pinks. Just kind of pull it up here, something like that. And maybe it can come to like a lighter pink right there or something. And then maybe this bottom one can go down to a deeper pink, something like that. Anyway, you can kind of see how this is working. The most important thing is just to get that nice crisp thing right there, and you can tweak this as much as you want to get whatever you want there. Let's put the blend mode on normal, put it all the way up to 100%, and you can see, we're getting something interesting there. I don't exactly like this, but I don't want to spend the whole time doing this. I already have a style created, so I'm just going to apply it like that, and it's pretty easy to get this style using that gradient overlay as we looked at. And so this is looking pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with this, and so we can keep moving on. Okay, so in the other example, we have this nice kind of bevel going all around. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do this inside of Photoshop, but if you really want to make this look good, you kind of have to do it by hand. And so I'm gonna take the time to do this, and I'm going to show you how to do it. It can take a little bit of time to do it, but it's not terribly difficult, so let's just see how this would work. Okay, so I might just take the gradient off here just so it doesn't get in my way. Okay, then what you want to do is just grab your pen tool with the P key, and then you just want to kind of draw out the bevel. And so you kind of want to think through how many bevels there are. So this one right here is going to be one. There's going to be one here, one there, there, like that. You know, so you just kind of have to go through and think how many they're going to be. The G is probably going to be the hardest one. And so then I'm just going to kind of start drawing over here. And then, you know, I just want to kind of go around and create this nice bevel here. And I want to put this behind it like that. And then, you know, I'm just going to kind of clean it up here a bit. And it's okay to go inside of it. In fact, you probably want to do that. And then I'm just going to kind of draw over here. It doesn't really matter if it's sloppy over here because the inside doesn't matter. And now once I have this over here, I'm going to grab my P key, hold alternate, and then I can start dragging this out. And this is a much easier way to do it. Usually if you use as few points as you can, it makes it much easier to get these nice curves going on. So I think something like that's looking pretty good. All right, so we got that. I might make this a different color just so I can see it a little bit better. Okay, then I'm just going to come up here and, you know, just kind of come down here like so, back up here, boom. And so I want to try to, you know, catch those corners like that. Maybe scoot it up just a bit. And, you know, the more time you spend tweaking it on the front end, the less time you're going to spend fixing it later. So if you have these little seams, it can be a good idea maybe just to overlap them just a touch, just so you don't get those ugly looking seams. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to come down over here, do the same thing, maybe come like right there, put a point about right there, put one down here, and then I guess I need to do something like that. I'll come back over here like that. And you can kind of see the process of how this is working. And so I basically just need to do this for all of these bevels. And you know, like I said, it's a little bit tedious, but it's really going to make this look a lot better and allow you to really fine tune how this looks and how the gradients work. And again, once you have that point set, just hold alternate and just kind of drag it out, and that'll help you get that nice smooth curve going on there. Instead of having to you know, watch me do all of this, I'm just going to do the speed up thing, and I'll get this all done, and then we'll come back to it and we can move on. Okay, so once you have all of those bevels kind of created, I find it helpful to go ahead and just group them all into one group. So just select all of these shape layers and do Command G to group them. All right, next we need to go ahead and add a gradient to all of these shapes. So you can just click on one of them. I think I'll use just this one right here. Just double click, go to Gradient Overlay, and we just want to do a simple black to white gradient overlay here. So make sure it's set to normal, make sure the opacity is all the way up. And you want to make sure that the gradient direction kind of, you know, follows the direction of the actual path or whatever. So I think that looks pretty good. And I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm going to copy this, so copy layer style, and then select all the rest of them, right click, say paste layer style, and it's going to paste that gradient on the rest of them. Now we need to go in and change these up so that they're not all exactly the same. And so for example, this one right here, we want basically this to happen. So you want the dark to hit the light to hit the dark, things like that, just so it kind of changes it up. And you also don't want to have, let me zoom in here. You can see how it kind of isn't going the right direction here, so we definitely want to change that one. So I'm just going to go in there and just change the direction to something like that. That'll work pretty well. Actually, I might flip it the other way, just so it kind of contrasts over there. And I might do the same thing over here. So grab this one and maybe just flip it. Yeah, that'll work pretty well. And you just want to go through and do that to all of these just to kind of get them the way that you want them. And so now we have our bevels going on, which is awesome. And we're going to make these look a lot better, but you get the kind of basic idea right here. So I'm just going to call this BW gradient. All right, now we need to duplicate this. And this is going to be our, I guess, gradient bevel. All right, so now we want to basically add a different gradient to this highlight. You can see, it's a lot darker, and it gives a nice bit of contrast to the actual text itself. So let's go ahead and maybe set this to like overlay or something like that. And now we need to change up the gradient. So I'm going to go into here, and I already have a style picked actually, so I'm just going to apply that right now. And you can see it's basically just this kind of punchy yellow to a kind of magenta or something like that with an orange in between. And so I think that'll look good. I'm just going to copy that layer style, select all of these in the gradient bevel, do paste layer style, and we're starting to get that nice gradient bevel going on. And it looks like we might need to go in here and just kind of tweak things a bit. All right, looking good. Okay, so now we can turn back on our regular gradient overlay, and you can see we're getting this nice look, and we're going to be doing a bunch of color correction later to really make this kind of pop out, but I think we're getting a nice look here. Okay, now we're going to duplicate our main text layer, and let's just call this highlight. Let's get rid of this gradient overlay, and what we want to do is add just a highlight into the center that's going to kind of make these edges kind of pop out. I already have another highlight here somewhere, and so I'm just going to add that. We want the same gradient overlay, I guess, actually. And then we want to use an inner glow, and for the inner glow, just set it to overlay, make it white, maybe something like 75% opacity or so, and make sure instead of the center that you change it to edge, and you can change the size to whatever you want. You just want this nice crisp highlight that's going to help just kind of make that text pop out just a bit more. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's close these up. And I think for right now we can just go ahead and group these all together. Let's call this text. Okay, so now we're going to make this text look a little bit better before we move on. So double click on your text layer, and we're just going to add an outer glow to this. And something like a magenta or a deep pink or something like that will work pretty well. Hit OK, just make sure it's set to screen. Bump up the size pretty heftily, and you want it to be pretty subtle. Just keep dropping the opacity, something like that. Looks pretty good. We're going to be adding more glows, so you don't want to oversaturate it too much. And then let's go ahead and do Command G to group this again. Call this text. And then double click, and we're going to be adding a gradient overlay. And I'm going to be using that same kind of overlay that I used with the punchy yellow to the magenta with the orange in the middle, except I'm just going to reverse it, and just depends on what you want. And you can see it's given us that nice kind of warm tone there. I set it to overlay. You can play around with different blend modes if you want to, but I think overlay looks pretty good, 100% opacity. And then let's add another outer glow. And you can see where it's going to bump up that effect even more. We're starting to get a really nice looking effect here. You want to, with this, just make sure you're nice and subtle with your size and with your opacity, because it can get a little out of control really fast. And you might even change up the color or something like that just to kind of play around with it. The nice thing is it's using the outer glow that we already used, and so it's kind of multiplying the effect. And so it can kind of help you get some really interesting looks with it. I might do something like that little blue right there. And hit OK, hit OK. And so I think our text is looking pretty nice, and so I think we'll stop right there with the text and kind of move on. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to create this grid here in the background. And let's go into Illustrator for this, and I just have a new document. I think I made it 2000 by 2000. Doesn't really matter since it's vector. Let's go ahead and just create a line here. Just make sure you don't have a fill, put the stroke on, and then all you have to do is just draw a straight line from top to bottom, something like that. You can make it as thick or as thin as you want. I think I'm just going to make it like 2 pixels wide. And then once it's selected, go up to Effect, and then go to Distort and Transform, and then choose Transform. With your Transform Effect dialog window, make sure Preview is enabled. Go ahead and crank up the number of copies, and then just start moving the horizontal over. And we want quite a few of these because we're going to be having to scale it up quite a bit. So I think I'll do something like that. I'll just do 70 copies at 28 pixels. That looks okay. Command C to copy that, Command F to paste it. and then just going to rotate it. And I need to go back into my transform, and instead of a horizontal of 28, I'm going to do a vertical of 28, and you can just turn on the preview to make sure you can see what you're getting. Hit OK. Let's just move that up there, kind of space it out to get those squares. Then select everything, go up to Object, Expand Appearance, and now it's going to be all these different individual lines, which is exactly what we want. Go ahead and select everything, then do Command-C to copy it. Let's move back into Photoshop, do Command-V to paste it. Let's go ahead and paste it as a smart object. Hit OK. It's going to paste it in there. Perfect. Okay, let's put that behind the text, and we're going to be adding a gradient to it. So let's go ahead and just add kind of a nice orange to pink gradient like so. I think I used almost the exact same one, basically this kind of punchy orange at the bottom going back to a pink. And then I also added some inner glow just to kind of make it glow a little bit, and then some outer glow to give it a little bit of outer glow. So right click and say Convert to Smart Object. And now, in fact, I might go ahead and take those effects off for right now and then convert it to Smart Object. And then I can add that style. Okay, now let's do Command-T to pull up the free transform, and then go to Perspective. And this will let you kind of skew it, and so if you grab this bottom one right here and hold Shift and just drag to the right, it's going to let you drag this out and really just change the perspective. You might turn off the effects just to make it perform a little bit better. And I just want to get a nice almost three-dimensional perspective, and you can pull it down if you want. You can also pull out the top if you want to. Just something like that. Looks cool. Put those effects back on. We have this nice grid. Okay, now we need to make this fade off into the distance, and so let's add a mask just by going to the Add Layer Mask. And now hit G to pull up your gradient tool, and you want to make the gradient just a black to white. And then you can just click and drag to create your gradient. You just basically want it to go from revealing to not revealing. So just something like that, and you can see it now. It looks like it's fading off into the distance, which I think looks really cool. And so I think that looks pretty good. You can keep playing around with the gradient to get it further out into the distance, closer, whatever you want. And so maybe somewhere in between that will be pretty good. There we go. Okay, I like that. I'm also going to group this, and I'm going to call this grid, and then add another layer mask, and then just pull up my eraser tool, get a nice big soft brush, kind of pull the opacity down a bit, and I might just start kind of brushing out here in the center just to kind of make that text almost look like it's shadowing on there, and also help the text pop off just a little bit. Okay, so now we have our grid, and I think we're right on track. Let's now work on this triangle that we have here. And so let's just pull up the polygon tool, and we want it to be 3 sides, and then just click and drag. If you hold Shift, it'll constrain the proportions. Actually, in the new Photoshop, it will do that anyway. And so let's just get a nice triangle here, something like that. Let's just stick it here in the middle. And I think I might turn off the text just to make this perform a bit better. Pull this up above the grid. Okay. Let's also turn off the grid for now. Okay, I'm going to scale this down just a little bit. Okay, now we need to kind of just cut out some shapes. So just grab your rectangle tool and then just start drawing some shapes, kind of like this. Play around with it until you get what you want. So once again, right click, merge shapes, select both of those, layer, combine shapes, subtract front shape. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Okay, so now we need to add some styling to this. So you can see in our example, it's got the nice gradient, of course, and then it has some beveling going on here. We're not going to draw the bevel like we did with the text. Instead, I actually just have another layer style that I already have created. So I'm just going to add a bevel and emboss like so. So if you just go to bevel and emboss, you can choose how you want to make it. I had mine with the bevels just on top like that. You can, change up the angle and all that kind of stuff if you want to, but I liked it the way it was, and so I'm just going to go with that. Let's go ahead and just draw another gradient. So let's create a new layer, and then let's create just a fun gradient up here. With that selected, then on our layer, make sure you have the gradient tool selected, and then just kind of draw a gradient. It's going to draw over the whole layer, which is fine. Then just right click and say create clipping mask. And so now it's going to constrain that to just that triangle. And the nice thing is you can just click on this and keep changing up your gradient to get what you want. You can change the angle, all that kind of stuff. And so it makes it really easy to play around with it. I think I like that right there. Let's put the text on, see what that looks like on top. That's pretty cool. And then I might just group these together, call this triangle. And then let's turn the grid back on. Looks good. So we're moving right along. We have most of our image here done. Maybe I actually kind of like that blue on the bottom of the triangle. So for my gradient, I might just scoot this orange over and then add that navy here. You can see this is really easy to just kind of change up however you want, so you can mess with this until you get exactly what you're looking for. And so let's do something like that. That's pretty sweet. Okay, so now let's add in our subtext here, this rules. And so pull up your text tool with T and just type in rules. And for this one, I'm going to be using a font called Bayshore. If you go to Creative Market, you can get Bayshore from there. It's like 16 bucks, but it's a really awesome font, and it's useful in a lot of different situations. So definitely be sure to check that out. If you don't want to use Bayshore, if you go to Adobe Fonts, there's one called Lakeside, which I think would also work pretty well, which you can get for free, so be sure to check that out. Okay, but I'm going to be using Bayshore, so I'm just going to change it to that. Okay, so I'm going to just add a quick layer style that I already had, which just had a nice gradient which goes from orange to white, and then I reversed it, and then it has an inner glow and an outer glow, which you can add just to kind of get that nice effect going on. Okay, so we have our subtext, we have our regular text, we have our triangle, we have our grid. Let's just make this a bit prettier, so I'm going to add just a new layer. Grab that brush again with B on my keyboard. Just grab a nice kind of soft round brush here. And I'm going to grab one of these pinks. And then here in the middle, I'm just going to start drawing in some pink colors. I have my opacity down quite a bit, and even that might not be enough. I just kind of want something pretty subtle, and I'm probably going to drop the opacity on this a bit. Okay, and then I'm going to do one more, maybe select, maybe for the color, I might do kind of like a lightish blue or so. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we're just about done with the building of this, and then we're going to just do some final tweaking of the look. Let's create these little sparkles here. And so for that, what we want to do is just grab your pencil tool. So it's here in your brush tool. Just go to the pencil tool. And you want the brush to be really small, like maybe like 2 pixels or so, maybe even just 4. Make sure you have a new layer. Let's put it up above the text. I'm going to turn off the text and everything else real quick. And then just hold shift while you're doing this to just kind of draw a quick little line like that. I do want it to be white. So let's just draw that. And then go up to filter and then go to blur and then do motion blur. And then just make sure your angle is 0, and you can see we're starting to get that nice tapered effect there. So just you can drag out the distance to get more or less, whatever you want. Maybe something like 150 will work pretty well. And then I'm just going to duplicate it, Command T, rotate it a bit. I don't want it to be a perfect star, so I might just do something like that. And then I'm just going to group these together, merge the layers, then just kind of rotate it a little bit off center like that. Let's put these back on. I can just put these, right where those nice things are right there. Might change this to like color dodge or something. And you might have to actually, let's leave it on normal. Maybe just create quite a few duplicates, merge these together. And then you can always add some, outer glow and stuff like that. So I think we'll do that. Let's pull this over. Maybe we'll do one right there. And let's put one kind of over here. So it's getting that nice kind of bleeding effect onto the text, which is kind of cool. Okay, so now that we have all of this pretty much done, I think we're ready to just make this look just really cool and really just kind of have a nice retro effect. So what we want to do is group all of these into a smart object. So just select them all, right click and say convert to smart object. All right, once you have your smart object, I'm going to, you can see in this previous example, I have, a couple different versions of this, but first, and they're going to be creating this almost anaglyph look. So I want to start by adding some noise to this to make it feel a little more vintage. So if you go up to filter and then go to noise, add noise, I'm going to do something maybe about 6 or so Gaussian and hit OK, and you can see, especially when you zoom in, you're getting that nice kind of grainy look, and that looks nice. All right, so now let's duplicate this with Command J and double click to go into the layer style. And I'm going to turn off all the channels but red and hit OK, and then just kind of scoot it over just a few pixels. Then I'm going to duplicate that one, double click, maybe just turn on the green channel, or maybe the blue, it just kind of depends on what I think I might do the green. Let's do the green. And then scoot it kind of over here, something like that, and it's just giving that nice kind of adding in some different colors, looks very retro, very cool. Okay, now we're going to add in some grunge texture like we have here. And if you go to wefunction.com, 60 subtle grunge brushes, you can either buy these for like $9, and these are great grunge brushes, so if you're looking for some grunge brushes, be sure to check these out. But you can also get, I think, about 6 of them for free just to kind of test out. And so either way, it'll work for this. So once you have those, add a new layer, pull up your brushes. We want to use the brush tool. I'm going to go in and find wherever those are, function subtle grunge, and you can kind of choose whatever you want. And then I'm going to get, let's see, a darker, almost kind of gray, maybe a little bit lighter. And then just start, let's maybe set this to overlay, maybe duplicate it once or so, a couple more times. We want this to be a pretty subtle effect. I'm going to merge those together. Let's change it to overlay. Let's pick another grunge here. Let's see if we can find, let's see, dirt. Set this to like overlay or something, maybe even multiply. Just kind of depends on what you're going for. It's kind of fun. Okay. So we're just about done here. I also have these scan lines in here, so let's go ahead and add some scan lines in here. So we need to create a rectangle. Let's make it pure white. Just add it right on top of everything. And then go into, double click, go to effects, and then choose pattern overlay. And in your default patterns, you should have something that looks like this. It's just like a horizontal line. And you can choose that, and you can also choose other ones if you want a larger scan line. If you don't have those, to create these, just create a new document, and once it pulls it up, you can basically make it, let's say, 1 pixel by, let's say, 6 pixels. Hit create. You want to definitely zoom in as far as you can, grab your pencil tool, and then we want to just grab a dark color here, just come down here, brush 1 pixel, and then once you have that done, you want to select, I guess you need to make this background into a layer, select the contents of that layer, go up to, oops, go up to Edit, and then say Define Pattern. And you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Scan Line. Hit OK. And then you can go back to your thing here, go to the Pattern Overlay, and you should have it there. And you get your scan lines just like that. Then let's group this, and then we can use a blending mode to just blend this in however we want. I might do something like multiply or color. Actually, I like color burn, so that looks pretty good. All right, I'm gonna call this scan line. All right, almost done. Last thing we want to do is just add a nice curves adjustment to just almost wash out the colors just a bit, as well as punch everything up a little bit more. So let's go into Layer and then New Adjustment Layer, Curves. Hit OK. And then I'm just going to pull down the darks just a bit and then really crush the blacks. And that's going to help just give it that look like that. Maybe punch up the brights just a bit. Pull in the highlights. And then let's go into the reds. And maybe, that's going to help pull out that glow a little bit more. Something like that. And you can really just play around with this until you get what you want. So there we go. And that's pretty much how you create some retro text inside of Photoshop. It's not the quickest procedure, but it really gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of ability just to really dial in how it looks and just create something cool. So I hope you learned a lot in this tutorial. I hope you'll have a lot of fun just playing around some retro text. Get in there and have some fun, and I will talk to you later. If you like this tutorial, be sure to visit ProChurchMediaUniversity.com, where you can find full courses, workshops, training, and more. ProChurchMediaUniversity.com.